Fresh from the Orchard. I'm Kelly Givens, and today we'll be growing raspberries. Raspberries are both delectably sweet and a bit tart at the same time, so you won't find any other fruit that tastes quite like them. Raspberry plants are brambles, meaning they send out long, thorny stems. The stems of raspberries are commonly called canes, and the canes are tied to a post or trellis as they grow. Raspberries are part of the rose family. In fact, they resemble climbing roses that have been trained to a trellis or a fence. Other raspberries are more upright and can be grown as shrubs. You may think that all raspberries are red, but guess what? They're not. Some are black, some are purple, and some are even yellow. But you can always tell a raspberry by its unique shape. Raspberries are thimble-like in shape. When raspberries are harvested, the fruit pulls away from the core, leaving a hollow receptacle. Their cousins, the blackberries, are solid and have a core which is part of the fruit. I've selected 2 raspberries that are recommended for my climate. Raspberries traditionally grow best in climates with cool summers and mild winters, but there are new varieties out on the market that will grow in almost any climate. The best time to plant raspberries in most climates is in the early spring after the danger of frost has passed. For warm climates, they can also be planted in the fall. I ordered my bare root plants in the spring and they arrived a few days ago. When they got here, I checked to make sure that the roots were still moist and set them aside in a cool place. The first raspberry I'm going to plant is Dorman Red. Dorman Red is a highly productive raspberry that produces large red fruit. The fruit has a cherry-like flavor and is particularly prized for cooking and for making jams and jellies. Dorman Red is very heat tolerant and is one of the best berries for southern climates. The canes of the Dorman Red raspberry are loose and floppy, so they'll need to be tied to a trellis. And the best type of trellis for raspberries is long and low. I made a trellis consisting of 2 posts with wire strung between them. I sunk 2 7-foot-long pressure-treated 4x4 posts into the ground, setting them 2.5 feet deep. Since I'm working in heavy soil, I simply tamp down the soil to hold the posts in place. If you're working in sandy soil, you may want to add quick-setting concrete mix to anchor the posts. The posts can be set anywhere from 10 to 20 feet apart. I set these 15 feet apart. I ran the first wire 2.5 feet off the ground and the second wire 4.5 feet off the ground. With the posts in place, I took 9-gauge coated wire and stapled it to the posts. Once the trellis was in place, I was ready to prepare the soil. I'm testing the pH level in this area, and it turns out that it's perfect because it's right at 6.3, and raspberries will tolerate soils as acidic as 5.8 or as alkaline as 6.8. But they really prefer soils between 6.0 and 6.5. Raspberries like a lot of moisture, but they can't tolerate soggy, poorly drained soils. Since this soil was clay-like, I added a 2-inch layer of finely ground pine bark over the planting area and worked it into the soil. Organic soil conditioners like this improve the drainage of clay soils by breaking up the tightly packed clay particles and creating spaces for water movement. I also sprinkled a cup of all-purpose 10-10-10 fertilizer over the planting bed and worked it into the soil. Now that the bed is ready, it's time to start planting. I went ahead and cut these canes back to about 6 inches. Now, whether you get your raspberries shipped bare root or buy them in container, if the canes are longer, you'll want to prune them back before planting. By cutting the canes back, you give the roots a chance to get established before the canes start growing. I dug the planting hole slightly deeper than the roots and wide enough to accommodate the roots when they're spread out. Next, I inspected the roots and pruned back any bruised or damaged sections. I placed the plant in the hole so that the crown of the plant, where the roots join the stem, was about 1 inch below the surrounding soil line. Unlike most plants, raspberries actually grow better if they're planted slightly below the soil line rather than above. I backfilled the hole about 3/4 of the way with soil, then added water to settle the soil around the roots and to get rid of any air pockets. When the water settled out, I finished filling the hole and watered again. I continued planting, placing the rest of the Dorman Reds along the length of the trellis. The other variety of raspberry I'm going to plant is called Nova, and it's named Nova after where it was developed, Nova Scotia. So it makes sense that it's cold hardy, but it's also relatively heat tolerant too. Nova is a vigorous raspberry that produces medium-sized bright red fruit that's pleasantly tart. Nova is classified as an erect raspberry with an upright growth habit, meaning that it can be planted in the landscape as a shrub or trained to grow on a trellis. Even though my Nova raspberries look like sticks now, they're going to make great shrubs in my landscape. In deciding where to plant them, I need to keep in mind two factors. Raspberries need plenty of water and a fair amount of sun. If you're in a northern climate, it's important to plant in a sunny spot. Raspberries produce best if planted in full sun in the north, although in hot southern climates, they'll tolerate a bit of afternoon shade. Raspberries got their name from the word rasp because the sharp thorns can scrape or rasp your skin. Now, Nova raspberries don't have as many thorns as other varieties, but it still pays to be a bit careful. So you want to find a spot in your yard to plant them that doesn't get a lot of foot traffic. I amended the soil just as I did for the Dorman Reds and planted the Novas. I planted the Novas in a straight row, spacing them 5 feet apart. It's easier to harvest a narrow strip of raspberries rather than to try to reach into a wide and thorny bed. Mulch the base of pine straw, but you can use any type of organic mulch. The mulch will help conserve water, keep down on weeds, and it'll give your landscape a finished look. For more information on raspberries or step-by-step instructions on what we've done so far, visit us at DIYnetwork.com. Coming up next, find out how your raspberries can tell you what they need, and later, why you might want to rent a couple of these guys. From the orchard. Today, we're growing raspberries, a delicious, delicate berry that's definitely worth the effort. Now that we've planted our berries, let's visit our orchard experts at Adams Farm to get some tips you can use in your berry patch. When choosing what kind of raspberries to plant, you need to think about how many crops you want each year. There are two main types of raspberries, summer-bearing and everbearing.
Now, everbearing bears 2 crops a year in the summer and again in late summer or early fall, and that's best for the homeowner because they provide a continuous flow of fruit into your kitchen. Now, the summer-bearing, it's better for a commercial crop like a pick-your-own. It bears 1 main crop a year and you pick everything at once and ship it out.
Raspberries are perennial plants, which means they live for many years. Each year, raspberry plants send up stems called canes, and each cane lives for 2 years.
The first year in a cane's life is called a primocane. It will not fruit the first year. The second year of a cane's life is called a floricane, and it will flower and produce fruit, and then it dies.
Earlier, we planted both erect and trailing varieties of raspberries. Now, the erect varieties can be pruned and grown as landscape shrubs, but the trailing varieties need to be trellised in order to hold up their canes.
This is the way you want to train bramble-type raspberries. These are floricanes, and you can tell because they produced flowers and fruit. They've been tied along the trellis with tape, or you can use household string. These are going to produce their berries this year, then they will die. Once they've died, they need to be cut back, and the primocanes that are being produced this year will be tied to the fence for producing berries next year.
Watering and mulching your raspberries will help ensure a good harvest, and one of the best ways to keep your plants moist is to mulch around the base. Now, you can choose whatever mulch best suits your landscape, whether that's pine straw, pine bark nuggets, or composted leaves. Either way, mulching will really make your watering efforts go a long way.
Raspberries require quite a bit of water, especially at harvest time. A good rule of thumb is 1 inch to 1.5 inches of water per week. Keep in mind damp in the summer, dry in the winter. A drip irrigation system such as this is very effective at keeping the foliage dry, which keeps diseases at bay. So when you're watering at home, try to water at the base of the plant without getting water on the foliage.
Drip irrigation systems are great for fruit plants, but don't feel like you have to go out and buy a fancy system. A good old garden hose works just as well. You want to make sure your raspberries are growing in the best conditions possible. Using the right amount of fertilizer on your raspberry plants will boost their fruit production. Your plants will also clue you in on what they need.
If you have yellow leaves, it could be a sign of overwatering, but more than likely it could be a sign of nitrogen deficiency. If you get too much nitrogen, then you're going to have a lot of vegetative growth and your fruit production is going to suffer. Now, a healthy leaf, getting the right amount of fertilizer, would be more dark green, rich color like this.
The best way to find out how much fertilizer your plants will need is to take a soil sample to your local county extension office. They can tell you everything you need to know about your soil. In most cases, you'll want to fertilize twice a year with a balanced 10-10-10 fertilizer. 10-10-10 isn't a brand name. It's a type of multi-purpose fertilizer. The numbers mean it has equal parts of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. The perfect recipe for happy raspberries. To learn more about taking good care of your raspberries, visit our website at DIYnetwork.com. Stay with us because when we return, I'll tell you why you want to keep your raspberries from where the wild things are. And later, find out why some people use raspberries instead of toothbrushes.
Life's tough enough.
Fresh from the orchard. I'm Kelly Gibbons. We're visiting experts in an orchard to get tips on growing raspberry plants. So far, we've planted, watered, and fertilized, but we still need to know how to protect our raspberries from pests and diseases. The first step, make sure you buy the right kind of plants.
Always purchase certified disease-free raspberry plants. Raspberry plants in the home garden rarely need to be sprayed, but they are subject to several diseases: anthracnose, cane blight, leaf spot, or in the southeastern United States, a fungal disease called double blossom.
If you do need to spray your raspberries, make sure you spray at night when the bees have gone to bed. Bees have a hard time surviving the use of pesticides and other harmful chemicals. Bees contribute a huge service to gardeners by pollinating plants so they in turn can produce fruit. Professional growers usually rent hives, and it's estimated that honeybees pollinate more than $14 billion worth of crops each year in the U.S. You can buy kits that come with a hive, a mated queen, and the bees. Or if you don't want a whole hive, you can plant flowers that will attract bees to your garden. Butterfly bush, clover, and black-eyed Susans all attract bees. Besides spraying for diseases, there are some other actions you can take that aren't chemical and therefore won't hurt bees.
The best defense against diseases is practicing good sanitation. Immediately after harvest, cut the old fluorocanes to the ground and either burn or destroy them.
Another good way to prevent diseases is to plant your raspberries a safe distance from wild raspberries or wild blackberries. Place them at least 1,000 feet from wild berries because they aren't disease resistant. Besides picking the right plants and choosing the best location, it's important to keep the area around your plants neat. The greatest dangers to raspberries are basic garden variety weeds.
You need to cultivate the weeds away from your red raspberry plants because weeds compete with those plants for the nutrients and the moisture But be careful not to cultivate any deeper than an inch or two because your plant roots are very shallow.
Red raspberries will send out new canes from their crown or roots that can end up in unwanted areas like between rows. These are called nuisance canes, but they can easily be eliminated simply by cutting them off at the roots. Besides pruning back nuisance canes, you also need to properly prune your raspberries. To do this, you first need to know whether they are summer-bearing or ever-bearing, and also factor in your climate.
When you want to prune your summer-bearing red raspberries, wait till they finish fruiting, and that's on the floral canes. That's your 2-year-old growth, and then cut them all the way to the ground. And then on your primer canes, thin them to about 6 or 8 strong canes, and then bring them up and trellis them for next year. If you're growing ever-bearing raspberries, simply cut them to the ground at the end of the harvest every year.
Ripe raspberries are soft and juicy and have a pleasant aroma. Pick them when they're plump and when they separate easily from the core. If you have to tug on them, they're not ripe yet. They should practically fall off in your hand. It's best to harvest raspberries early in the morning when it's still cool. Raspberries ripen over a several-week period, so you want to check your garden every other day and pick them when they're at the peak of ripeness.
One of the best things about growing raspberries is that they are self-pollinating or self-fruitful, which means you only have to plant one variety to get fruit. Coming up next, learn how to keep your raspberries from sticking to one another and find out how you can get recipes for your raspberry harvest. Special treat, but when they're straight from your own garden, they're sweeter than ever. It's best to eat raspberries soon after picking them and definitely within a day or two. But if you have extra raspberries that you can't eat right away, you can always freeze them. Raspberries are very delicate, which is why they're so expensive at the supermarket. You should never wash them until just before you use them, because too much moisture after picking could make your raspberries spoil early. You can freeze raspberries in a single layer on a cookie sheet. Then pour the frozen berries into a larger container for storage. With this method, the raspberries won't stick to one another, and you can easily remove just a few berries from the freezer at a time. Frozen raspberries may lose some of their texture, but not a bit of their flavor. Not only are raspberries a delicious addition to any meal, but they also seem to have some hidden powers. They contain a natural substance called ellagic acid, which actually helps prevent cancer. These amazing little berries have also been shown to help lower high cholesterol. And in some cultures, people believe that raspberries can do things like battle morning sickness, combat infection, and even help keep your teeth clean. I love raspberries, fresh and whole and sprinkled over cereal or mixed into a fresh fruit salad. And for a cool summer drink, nothing beats a fresh smoothie. This one's made from raspberries, bananas, and yogurt. It's easy to make and it's really refreshing. You can find the recipe for these smoothies as well as some amazing raspberry cream puffs at DIYnetwork.com. Thanks for joining me today as we learned all about raspberries. I'll see you next time as I plant and harvest more fruits fresh from the orchard.